Okay, this is going to be episode 37 of OverSight. And we're doing this show, I'll just give everyone full transparency at the beginning. We are doing this show before the Super Bowl happens, just so that, nobody's annoyed or unduly irritated by the circumstances of the world. And at this moment, right now, evil hasn't prevailed, so it's still fine. This is like the moment in the movie that everyone will look back on and wish that it'd be like this. So, okay, obviously, still technically the off-season. We're still waiting for the Overwatch League to begin. But the only action I've seen recently is analysts attempt to completely hypothetically speculate how good a team that they've never seen play a video game would be, and then argue to the death with each other over anyone else who thinks hypothetically that actually they might be the number 5 team and not the number 4 team. That's how sort of desperate we've got for attention now, guys. It's like, that's my sport at the moment. I'm waiting for the actual games to begin, Monty, because this is just feckless, mate.
Well, some of the people like to trash talk each other, which is,
sure,
is all in good fun. I haven't released power rankings yet because I hadn't talked to all the teams. So we spent all the casters who are in the United States right now, so not including Brandon's Sideshow, were in meetings with all the teams, sat down with them, had a chance to talk with them. So I didn't want to release power rankings before I did that. And also I've been visiting a bunch of the team houses to watch scrims and stuff like that. And before, everybody says, aha, Monty, but you said scrims don't mean anything. Well, you'd be right. But the thing is that when 19 teams tell me the same thing, then there is sort of a consistency there that
yes,
means that perhaps the scrims might be, that is the kind of information that you want out of scrims. One player or one coach on one team saying one thing about another team could be whatever, for whatever reason. The other team could have been practicing an experimental strategy against them that they're never going to use. They could have had a fight in their team that day and be off their game. It's not very good. But when everybody tells me independently of each other, without even conversing with each other, that Hangzhou Spark is pretty good, then that's the kind of data that you want, right? That's the kind of data that is valuable out of the scrim environment. And even then, you don't know whether they're going to perform on stage or not. So there's still caveats even with that.
No, by the way, on that topic, I will also say, I think I've even made this point on Oversight before, but as a journalist, you learn the formula of how people answer questions. And if you ever notice, most scrim hype in interviews isn't even what it appears to be. As in, if someone ever says something like, oh, we were doing really well in scrims, actually, we're having a lot of good games against top teams, that actually means they lost most of the games. That means they just thought that they went well. These are all codes. The whole point is they would say I had a really good scrim record if they had an 80% scrim. So what's mad, Monty, is you actually end up with a scenario where you might hear from all the players what their scrim record is, but the wording makes it sound like everyone won, and so you can never. And also, I'll give you a great example that just happened to me on a League of Legends talk show. Is I'd heard an interview with a player for a top European team who was saying oh yeah, we are smashing every scrim, we can't lose. Then I talked to someone else and they're like, yeah, but that's actually because some of the teams I boycotted them, so they were only playing 2 teams. It's well, oh, that would have been interesting context to add when you tell me you're smashing all the scrims, right? But conveniently they don't do that. It's they're all politicians, man. They all know the fucking company line to toe on that. So, right, here's the thing though. What you do have to do though is, when we do the episode just before the Overwatch League season starts, when we do the mega episode, you have to make a power ranking for that. Okay. And then we'll do a real battle of the power rankings, because we'll have a few people on that show that have done the power rankings as well, So
sounds good. I mean, I will actually do a power ranking. Like I said, I've been visiting team houses. Okay. I'm going to be visiting some more in the coming week. So as soon as I wanted to be able to actually see and judge the scrims for myself, because you're saying, teams judge scrims in all kind of weird, biased ways, thinking that they, you talk to a team and you're like, wow, we did really well with those scrims. I'm just sitting there like, you didn't? I was watching this.
Sure. Right, so anyway, since it is actually famous that I'd never introduced the guests on the show, I think I actually think I did do it last time, but just because I remembered that I never do it, we'll just do that to start off with now, as opposed to just direct a question to them out of nowhere. So, and also we'll just pretend as though this is in fact a late night talk show and not something that's got a YouTube description where you can just see who they are and see the name on the screen. But we'll pretend they can't, Monty, and again, I'll pretend to be a radio announcer. So the bottom right hand corner, which you wouldn't be able to see if it was radio, is dpei from the Los Angeles Gladiators, a team that you may remember was not that good, And everyone was like, oh, what's happened to Show 4? Is he bad now or something? Oh, is he like everyone else from Cloud9? And then what happened is they got Fisher and he was really good. And then they sort of like did kick Fisher, but then he also wanted to be kicked, but then he also was removed, but then he also chose to be removed and chose to himself kick himself. I don't know, because the problem is I'm not in some sort of like a fucking cell right now, having my brain broken into by the fucking Agent Smith out of the Matrix or something for the codes to Zion. So I don't really know what happened with Fisher, but something happened like that, and it was quite confusing for us all. In between there, dpei like ran into the Royal Rumble, came off the top turnbuckle, and it killed someone. I'm not even sure. I can't remember. Something crazy. Again, I forget all the details, boy, but it's the big pictures, the images are what stick in my mind. So something like that, and then yada yada yada, and then
he released the most unnecessary apology that only made things seem worse than it actually was.
Then he did like the Conor McGregor. He was like, "I'd like to apologise from the bottom of my heart. Absolutely nobody. The Gladiators does whatever they want. We run LA." And then yada yada yada. The off season happened. No upgrades. Something. Now you're gonna win. That was last year summarized, right?
Yeah, that seemed like a fair and accurate description of last year completely.
Okay.
And this year, this year I see as brand new, so I'm really excited. I think our team is brand new, but I think we have like some stuff from last season that we can build off of, and I think it feels really good coaching this team, and I see a lot of like growth in this team overall.
Okay. And then our other guest, just to quickly bring him in so we can start talking, is daemoN, who you might know is a coach for the Paris Eternal. Now, if you're thinking, who is the Paris Eternal? Don't think, right, yeah, it's the team in Europe, you know, finally let the Overwatch League properly expanding. We don't just rely on Philadelphia and then bad Overwatch teams to bring in Europeans. Actually, you know, there's going to be a good franchise now. Or is there? Because some people rated them last in the power rankings. So there is that. I'm just going to throw that out there, including whoever that Korean guy is for X6 Gaming. He fucking hates you guys as well. He had you guys last as well. Whoever that guy is, by the way, on Reddit, go look this guy's power rankings up, because those are my favourite ones. Is this Korean guy who was like a coach of X6 Gaming? Because he has Shanghai Dragons #1 in their conference. He had them like tied for first place in his tail list. So he's done some bold predictions for that way. So, right, let's start out then. So let's talk a bit about the off-season then, because one thing I'm quite interested in is with all the expansion teams and all these players that are going to come into the league but go to new teams, is I wanted to see which of the existing franchises actually did try to upgrade their roster, who made bold moves in the off-season. Right, dpei, from the outside, it doesn't look like Gladiators did much. So what was the philosophy for Gladiators in this sense?
I mean, I think we made some moves. I think we kind of dropped a lot of players, but we kept a lot of the returning core. A lot of it was just, we really liked working with these guys. We saw the growth in the past year. We knew that kind of like what they would look like in a year from now, or like try to. One of the most inconsistent thing I think in esports is just scouting. But after having worked with a player for a year, you actually get to see like what they're actually able to do. And we really liked all the people on our team, both in terms of mechanics and like how they function within the team. And we thought they all exuded the gladiator qualities. We made some additions, right, where we felt like we had either strategic holes or just necessary holes, right, with the main tank position. But I think that was kind of our thing going back, is we had really proven talent and people who we knew could function well within our structure and our team.
Okay. So one of the things that was very interesting to me about the Gladiators last year, and I'd be also interested to hear daemoN's or Demon's. What do you prefer, daemoN, Demon?
Demon, any actually.
Demon, okay. Demon's opinion on this, because he was working on the Valiant at the time, so I'd be interested in his perception of the Gladiators. But like, I hated casting the Gladiators when the season began. I thought you guys were the most like vanilla. It wasn't because you were bad; it was because you were just boring. And, you know, when I thought about, what do the Gladiators bring that's unique? And you were the most vanilla team possible. And which is very surprising, because by the end of the season, you guys were really fun to watch. And I think a lot of that for me came from sort of the transformation of your DPS rotation. So first off, it was partially like Surefour's improvement. Second off, it was you guys using your DPS to their strength. So it was like pulling out hydration on the Doomfist, and you guys had really interesting strategies when you would change your DPS players. And I think more so than any other team in Overwatch League, it felt like you guys had deliberate plans based around the players in the game that you were going to execute on certain maps. And that was super fun to watch. also getting Fissure in there and him just styling on people was really entertaining as well. So from a coaching perspective, what changed over the course of the season? Like, how did you start to develop these plans and how you were going to use these players and how you're going to like sort of maximize your strength?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we look at preseason. I think from my POV, we did have like niche strategies. Like we had Chaz on Genji, like the triple DPS solo heal on Nubani, switching to Bastion. Like we had some unique strategies, but I guess it's just more noticeable, I think, if you're winning, one. Two, I think, like, really we were focusing on fundamentals more than anything, kind of from stage 1, stage 2. We were focusing a lot more on fundamentals of communication. So, like, changing your comps, if you're always having, like, diverse amount of comps, it's hard to, like, master a style or master something. But we focused a lot on dive, right? Even though we weren't the best dive team, we focused a lot on dive because we thought dive would be something in the future very good to run. And also that it just like creates fundamentals of communication. You can really like build off that. The dive meta like has a lot of coordination where you need to like be talking constantly. And not only did we feel like it was strong strategically in terms of like agnostically, if we had chess pieces, like dive is the strongest thing, right? Boston and Nixel kind of proved this in stage 1, stage 2, but also that like it would just serve us better in the long term. So we were less focused on like niche strategies and we were more focused on what I would say as fundamentals. So I think that kind of like explains our stage 1. We had like, I guess, I think we did have like more vanilla strategy, but it was more because we were less focused on that as coaches and we were more focused on execution and communication more so.
So, daemoN, when you were preparing for the Gladiators, how did that change over the course of the season as like Surefour improved and we saw them add Fissure and have more depth to their strategy? What was your opinion on Gladiators while you were on the Valiant?
No, I think there's no surprise in what I'm hearing right now. It's like, I think Gladiators and Valiant is in a way kind of similar. What dpei said about like working on fundamentals and communication, don't want to step in something that I don't know, but you had as well Bishu that can speak as well English and Koreans, which like help overall. And like, I suppose there was like a lot of stuff that you needed to work on. And yeah, I think working on fundamentals is what brings as well excellence by being consistent. And that was what Valiant was looking for as well. But we didn't really ever change. We like from stage 1 to stage 4, we were more into like of a meta team trying to be like really consistent in what we were doing. Kind of the same thing, but at the end, it's like walking and Gladiators was the same, just that unique players. Chess, for instance, is like a really great player. He can play DPS as well. Like they had like multiple talented players, and they could do pretty much whatever they wanted at the end of the league. But yeah, like for me, Gladiators was like every time a fun match because at the same time we had really close match. I think it was 3-2, like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, you had very close matches.
Yeah, and obviously the crowd and stuff. Like I don't know, the match against Gladiators was always like the match we were the most looking for, at least as a team. So I don't know. I just like Gladiators as well.
Yeah, I think kind of going back, like I view Valiant very similarly as the Gladiators. It's funny because we're rival teams, but I have a lot of respect for what the Valiant did last season and how they kind of ran things. It was clear to me that they always had a systematic way of like learning and getting better. And so like, yeah, I see a lot of the similarities. I think there were like different things. We had different mid-season acquisitions, but by the end of it, we could kind of like get like synergy and kind of like our flow going towards the end where it was much more based on strategy or like adjustments that we needed to make because we had the fundamentals set from like stage 1, stage 2, even stage 3, right? Like I think our fundamentals were still settling in stage 3, to be honest, like midway through stage 3. And that's because of mid-season acquisitions and stuff like that. But I kind of view Valiant the same as in season 1. They kind of seemed like very similar to us, like more fundamentally.
Right, since in the first season, the acquisition of Fissure was part of when the results kind of started to turn around, and obviously he's such a big character in the game and out of the game that his narrative to some degree dominated the storyline, the Gladiators, and then obviously, like I alluded to, with some of the drama towards the end of the season of would he play in the playoffs, etc. What would you say, dpei, to people who thought of Fissure as like the star of the team or the captain of the team or the essential player? Because obviously this season there won't be any Fissure on your team at least. I
mean, I think Fissure is a really great player. I have like objectively, he's just a really great player in game. He just makes a lot of really good decisions, individually very skilled, right? If you're just talking about primal mechanics, he obviously has very good primal mechanics, but past that, he's a very smart player, views things very objectively and kind of tries to figure out what's good. And so, like, I think he did provide like a band-aid fix for us in terms of like leadership and shot calling. Especially in stage 2, you can kind of see just like a jump. But stage 2 and stage 3, we really couldn't get a lot of gains. So and there's like other issues to that, but I'm just kind of noting like between stage 2 and stage 3, you see a big jump between stage 1 and stage 2, I think, in terms of our decisiveness and things like that, in terms of our engages. But stage 2 to stage 3, did we look like that much better? I think we got like a little bit better. And then stage 4, I think, was a different story in terms of like, I felt like we figured out the meta like much faster than other teams. Not that our heroes had like, and certain heroes were more favored in stage 4. So that like geared more towards like Hydration's hero pool, Surefour's hero pool. Like Pharah Widow was more used rather than like Tracer Genji, which is like one of our weaker like set of champions, I would say. So I mean, I think Fissure provided a hole for, or fixed, like Band-Aid fixed a hole for us in the middle of the season, but our team really was growing in that time. It's just really hard to see because people always point to results, but we kind of see internally how people are improving and the growth of our players specifically.
And daemoN, you guys on Valiant, before we get into, like, we will get into what you've changed in terms of your players on Gladiators, and then of course the construction of the Paris Eternal. But you on Valiant also were looking, you had to make some trades last season. Obviously, you traded with the Fuel, you got rid of Unko, you picked up Custa. You know, Kariv was bouncing around from a flex support role to DPS, and he maybe is DPS again now, I guess. So what was your thought process between the kind of changes you were making over the course of the season as like you were changing players' roles and then making these trades?
I think it was like more of like a team situation. When we needed to make those trades, it was like with specific goal. For instance, having a leader in the team, like a specific leader that could assist Fate, that like is already doing like most of the calls. Is like a really great player. Like in terms of communication, there's like no comparison with like any other player. But we needed someone else as well to like help him either inside or outside of the game, and that's where, when we thought about Costa as like a mandatory pick, obviously we needed to make some sacrifices. And I think like kind of Unko got like on the trade market for that, because he was like the best player we could like get for Dallas, and all the stuff as well that we wanted to bring for like both Unko and the team. But yeah, in the end, I think the add of Costa changed the team in a positive way, because we were like more solid, more structured, and again, not on the inside of the game, but as well outside of the game. And yeah, for like other specific change, I think it was just good for the team overall. This is just like, that was mandatory changes, so we could move forward into stage 3 and 4 and like be a better team, I suppose.
Just the outside looking in, that trade looked really good. Like Verbo, I would say was one of your weaker players individually, mechanically. I don't know what his communication was like, but you kind of Unko, I think, is a very good piece. Like, I think that was a good trade for both teams, and the fact that Fuel got like a really mechanically proficient Zen player, and I think Unko is really mechanically skilled, right? But you traded for one of your weakest roles and got leadership out of that, like you said, and then you had someone who could complement Fate. I think it was like very clear you guys gained a level of consistency there, and it was a better trade for you, at least for one season type of thing. But in the long term, who knows? Like, I don't know, like how good Unko is, how long Custa will play, stuff like that. Like, but in that season, it seemed like a really good trade and made a lot of sense from at least an outside POV.
Right. In terms of then some of the off-season moves, so obviously dpei, your strategy, it's a very keen one, a very shrewd one. No one else has picked up on this, mate. I think I'm the only one who's noticed. It's that you just keep going back to that old Liquipedia entry for Kongdu Panthera and just recruiting players one by one that aren't in the London Spitfire. I think I've cracked it, right? I've caught the code, right? I'm the only one who's figured it out. So why was this massive bidding war for DK, and why is he the guy you wanted in the off-season?
One, I want to like dispel rumors about dpei. Like his salary isn't like 300K. Yes, he's a very good player. He's like a 17-year-old. Like
that's 2.99 and 99 cents. You know,
I mean, like dpei's just a 17-year-old kid who's good at the game, right? Like I feel like people forget this, that like he's a 17-year-old kid. He's just coming from Korea. Like imagine you like in our own lives, right? Like, what were you guys doing when we were 17? I was a complete fucking idiot when I was 17. I don't know about you guys. Like, I couldn't handle the pressure of that. So, I mean, like, I'm just noting, like, I know expectations are high for dpei, but, like, I think it's kind of, like, ridiculous when people point to him and say, like, this is going to be the savior of, like, all times. He's the second coming of Jesus, you know, like I hear like kind of like ridiculous.
And then you're like, yeah, okay, boss, just sign the check.
Yeah, and then you
sign the check, like, boss.
The problem with this is I agree with you, but you are also the one paying the most for this.
I mean, it's like he's saying all that as he gets out the big stack of money. Like, listen, DK, while we back this Brinks truck up to your mum's house in Korea, listen, you're not some superstar player, you know, you're just a young guy. Anyway, oh, another truck coming in, right? Yeah, but back that in, beep, beep, beep. Like, come on, man. And the signing suggests he is going to be a superstar, doesn't it?
I mean,
you could say
you have to look at the evaluation of the market.
But like, I don't think any other player is like that's new to Overwatch League is getting paid as much as he is.
I mean, the valuation of the market depends on the time, depends on the team bidding, depends on like the position, right? Yes. There's like a lot of different factors that go onto it, and like it's not like I'm like giving out the contracts and stuff, right? I'm merely suggesting the player, saying what I see good into them. Like relative value is like very hard to distinguish, but I mean, like he is a very good player. He's proven in Korean contenders, and the fact that he's like had a long or like relatively long playing career for someone who is relatively new. But I think just noting for him and like just other people looking into our team, like Overwatch is a team-based game. Like I think narratives are like formed very, very like for individuals, right? And I think there's a good reason for that. But Overwatch, I can't think of a higher team-based game than Overwatch. You are constantly in 6v6 team fights. League of Legends, you have like a laning phase. Basketball, there's one ball, one guy can control it. Overwatch is such a team-based game that I think it's like really unfair. Like just like you guys create a lot of narratives, right? That's like part of what you guys do. But at the same time, it's really I think kind of strange when Overwatch I think is one of the most team-based games, and then we like point to like one or two people, right? And similarly, I don't think it's fair for like the 17-year-old Korean guy who's never been outside of Korea, who's like probably lived a very sheltered life, gets like all this expectations and like hype around him, and like if he doesn't do well, like I'm sure like people are gonna shit on him. Like Sinatra last year, right? Like I thought he was a good player, certainly young, moldable, but he had like I think unfair expectations around him because I don't know why, just because people like form this narrative around it. I think I've even heard it on like the desk and stuff. Like once Sinatra comes in, once Super comes in, Shock's just going to be absolutely insane. Like there's no way. Like Konami's a downgrade. Like Dante's not as good as Sinatra and stuff like that. And like
dpei, I'm with you on this. Like I get the premise. Like you're definitely right, by the way. Like all narratives are obviously, you know, fairly reductive. Like they're to basically, I would say most narratives are to tell the story of the game to a layman who doesn't know the intricacies of the game. So it's easier to give him a player to attach to, or you know, here's the star player or whatever. And so you're right in a sense, right? Like I would actually give, since it's the Super Bowl today, the analogy that it's like American football. So everyone on talk shows talks as though it's a 1v1 sport and the two quarterbacks play each other as though it was tennis or something, right? Whereas in reality,
like
you know,
100-man roster, right?
Yeah, it's like 53-man roster. I think it's the famous line they always say about the NFL, right? So the idea that, you know, even the best quarterback isn't actually winning the whole game himself. But you know what? To give the analogy, there's a plenty of quarterbacks in the NFL who aren't even the best player on their team who are making fucking $10 million a year. And you know what? They're quite fine with that narrative, actually. You know, in the same sense, they can live with that narrative. You know, fucking Alex Smith or whatever. There's a lot of people out there who aren't that good, who love that narrative dpei. So in the same sense, when you said, what were you doing when you were 17? Definitely wasn't making the kind of contract that Sinatra was. That's why when I used to do my paper round, I didn't have a lot of expectations on me. You know, just deliver the papers, basically. There wasn't a timer. I wasn't playing against any of the other paper boys. If I'd had like a 200k contract, there might have been some local interest in me on that that paper around. People might have started asking questions when the paper didn't come, when I didn't bring the supplement on a Sunday, you know. So I get what you're saying. You are right, totally, dpei. I agree. But there's also, you can sort of see why people do it as well, though, right? The
especially because you were part of this bidding war process, which was driving dpei.
I can't believe he's trying to downplay it after he signed the player. Like, he just wants it all his own way, doesn't he? Like, what is this? Right, okay, what next,
trying
dpei?
to have his cake and eat it too. It's amazing.
Next, if DK is the MVP of the league, he's just going to come back to this episode. See, I told you, when I got him, he was just a nobody, a 17-year-old kid, barely even knew the game. I told him, son, stick with it. You stay with me. I've brought up a lot of youths in my time, you know. Stick with me. I'll show you the ropes. Next thing, you know, he was only the bloody MVP. I'm surprised someone else didn't sign him.
All right, enough of that. So what do you like about dpei? So you've got dpei now. You really wanted him, clearly. So what is it about this player that you thought would be great on the Gladiators?
I think you guys were talking about it kind of like on your last podcast, but finding like these flex DPS players are very rare, and I think become increasingly more important as Overwatch balance develops. Like, I think the game is becoming more and more strategically balanced, and I think like, it's just unclear what will be good at any given point. So the more flexible your players are, the better it is, right? Last season, I think you could have a Tracer main and you were probably fine with that Tracer main. Like, we look at kind of like star Tracer mains, and like Soon is someone who I think was really good. Sabiobi, like Asher, like these guys like had a lot of good Tracer play, but maybe couldn't transition. It's unclear whether they could transition to other roles. dpei is kind of more proven on the other roles, like having seen it myself and kind of seeing how his mind works a little bit. He just has an intuition for how to play the game, as well as being able, like, proven to be able to play other roles. Like Soon, Sabiobi, maybe they're considered like Tracer one tricks, but they turn to like Widow, right? Like Soon in particular, like had a good Widow by the end of the season. Whether he can learn like a lot of heroes fast, right, is really the question in meta dependent situations. Each stage, we know Blizzard balancing is like kind of random. Hanzo is randomly just going to be the most OP character in the game, like stage 4, right? Like who would have seen the Widow resurgence, or who would have seen Mercy being really good? Like I would want a Mercy one trick, like at that point, right? Like I'm like, Raxu would be insane in like playoffs, but we can't have that at all points. We can't predict what Blizzard's going to patch and how people will interpret it. So someone who is really flexible is really valuable, and I think it's kind of like a long-term investment, and it hedges against certain metas, right? Like going from stage 4 to playoffs, sure, there could be a drastically different meta, and if you just pick up on the right meta, you could win the championship. Just strictly off that. If you put yourself like in the playoff position, you have reasonably good other pieces. If you have the right meta for your team or for a specific player, it could change the complexion of the playoffs as a whole. So I think that's why he's so valuable. But also, just talking about him specifically, he's a very smart player. I don't think it's like all there in terms of like, I think he does base a lot on intuition. Like he's just someone who grinds the game and plays a lot of intuition. But I can also tell that he like learns from experiences and like really understands his role, which is like, I think a rare thing in Overwatch. Less rare as we become like higher skill cap, but he understands his role, like on any given character, what he should be doing, what's the maximum value he can be getting. And then obviously the mechanics are very good for all the heroes that he does play.
Okay. So daemoN, do you have thoughts about dpei? Were you looking at him as well, or?
I don't a lot. I'm kind of the same as dpei. I think this is really team-based, and I must give like a lot of props into Gladiators and dpei picking like all those players. As a team, I think they're really strong, and at the preseason I was like, this team is gonna be crazy. So like whatever picks they had, like it was pretty crazy. For dpei especially, yeah, it's like he's a really good player, really flexible as he says, and obviously when you try to make a good team, you need to have solid base, and obviously having like really, really good flex DPS player in your team makes it like great as a team. Just take Fusion, for instance, with Carpe. So obviously the core is already really strong, either the past or the new core, but adding dpei in it is just like the cherry on the top. It's perfect. So obviously like both other players and team-wise, I think it's gonna do great overall.
So in general, when you guys are constructing rosters, and we'll get into Paris's like roster construction here shortly, when we talk about the way that the Overwatch team has like balanced the Overwatch patches, and you are both sort of agreeing that flex DPS players are very important because you never know what the meta is going to be. And typically, as we've seen last year, it's much easier to keep a tank line and a support line together because there have been less or fewer changes because there are fewer tank and support heroes that each of those roles has to know in order to be effective. And there are many more DPS heroes that can be played in different metas. So you have to have more DPS. So when you're coming into building a roster, do you put your money and put your resources into getting a wide range of DPS players who can adapt to any meta? Or are you more concerned about putting your money into your tank and support lines, which are always seemingly going to remain the same, or at least very similar?
I predict they'll find a way to answer your question, but actually say both, but just do it like very gradually. So anyway, go ahead. See what you do, gentlemen.
I'll let daemoN go first. I feel like I've been answering first.
Okay. Come on, daemoN.
I'm going to back off your answer is what I'm saying.
I don't really have an answer. I think it depends on the market as well, because obviously if you have this great player, tank or support, you want to like get him, but at the same time, if you don't really have it, maybe you want to put resources on the DPS. I mean, again, it really depends, but at least for Eternal, it was more about like having more of the logic core, which means that I wanted to like, I wanted to have every player that could like influence the meta in any way. We were speaking about like having flex DPS, which is the most important part, but I kind of agree and disagree at the same time. Just take like the flex support in stage 4, then you need to play DPS heroes. For tanks, you still need to play Orisa, and maybe not all the tanks are like pretty comfortable. And speaking about main support as well, like obviously there's like 2 heroes that you need to master, but at the same time, we don't have like those like huge Mercy and Lucio player main support. So as dpei was saying, like obviously if you had like Mercy in the meta, you obviously want this kind of Mercy one trick in your team because you know like he's gonna do great. But at the same time, if it's switching on Lucio and it's like the meta is switching on Lucio and he's not really comfortable on it, it can be a problem. So I think the idea right now on building a roster is having like every piece that you need. And I think on my case, trying to be the Eternal, it was like the objective ever for the main tanks. Trying to have like specific strength, either if it was like a Reinhardt based meta or Winston Orisa based meta. Same goes for the DPS; they pretty much cover everything. And for the support, it's kind of the same. I have total confidence in Crew's ability to flex, and like same for the support flex. So yeah, I think it depends. And obviously, if you have like specific resources, or you need to think about putting like specific resources in specific positions, I think you need to take Gladiators in consideration as an example. I think they did great in like acquiring the resources and putting it on the specific position they needed. They keep the core, they paying it like better, and they take like superstars like DK and had as well what I consider, because this is still a team-based game, like Roar and all the people that they got like are superstars in my opinion. And the team itself is a superstar team on the way they build it. So
everyone can't be a superstar, mate. Come on. Oh, I think he's crashed. Has he crashed?
No, you're good.
I think he's just noting kind of like the individual skill is like high on our team. I think that's what he means by superstar. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's what you mean by superstar, right? Like individual skill is like high, right?
I mean, listen, I know. Listen, I get it. You guys are coaches. You're working with all these big egos, these young kids. You know, you're out there preaching the Bible of like it's teamwork. You know, you win by playing as a team. We're not those guys. We understand the concept of a team. Like, stop fucking. Why are we being treated like prisoners of war, just being interrogated by a propaganda? We understand, but you know what? No matter what you tell me about what they do in the game, at no point in time would that make iRemix better than Fisher. Like, there are superstar players. Please. Anyway. Here's a question. I noticed both of your teams haven't signed the max amount of players. There are a couple of spots left over. What is the logic behind that? Like, is that supposed to be a potential solution to a meta switch later? Did you want a smaller size team so there was less people on the bench? What's the philosophy there?
I can just speak for my side. Like, once you have extra people, it's like harder to deal with as coaches, and you don't have like resources to really put into your like substitute players. At any given point, you can have them like daemoN said for like insurance, more or less. Like if a meta goes a certain way, you have all these holes covered, and that's kind of like similar to how we built the roster too. Is like we wanted every single hole covered in terms of like possible metas that we've seen recently. We can't predict the future, but we can kind of like trend at least this year what it might look like. So I mean, having those spots available is good for like mid-season acquisitions, but also you don't need unnecessary like fat on your team. Essentially, like if someone's not going to add purpose onto your team, and you can't even see a reasonable reason to have that person on your team, you don't need to fill in the roster slots. I think like Fusion is the team that had the 12-man roster. Like London had a 12-man roster, but functionally, like London, like functionally just was better off with 8. Sure. Fusion really didn't use like a lot of their bench, I will say, right? Like, so, or like, and if they did use their bench, it was like for maybe like short-term reasons, punishment reasons, who knows? But like, you're realistically not using like Snill. You're realistically not using Joe Meister and stuff like that. Like, they didn't want to like consistently use those players. So like, fomenting that growth as a coach is like non-trivial, especially when you have to focus on winning now. Right? I
mean, Fusion, like the Valiant. I mean, Valiant also had a 12-man roster. And how were you guys using it? Because talking to Noah, it seemed like you guys didn't want an academy team because you were just going to scrim internally against, with your 12-man roster. Wasn't that part of the logic, daemoN?
Yeah, kind of. I was kind of coming out of the blue in Valiant as well, so I didn't really know the actual project behind the 12-man roster. But when we tried to really go for it, it was kind of problematic to say it this way. Like, we're not. I think teams are not ready yet to really like build such a structure, and at the same time, the players aren't either. So like, I think we need like some time before like going for 12-man roster. And in Valiant, it was like trying to go for internal scrims or trying to develop talent instead of going for an academy team. But at the same time, like, you can't really like, you need everything in your hand to like give those players like structure, etc. And in the middle of the season with too much per week, it's kind of difficult. So I think it was like kind of on the get-go, and like we didn't really make like the right decisions. But at the same time, it was like interesting on some standpoint, like experience, the way we could like structure it and like give interest to the players and some training, etc. Take for instance KSF that begin on the second team, if we could say it like this, and end up in the main team because he's a talent. So I think this is the idea behind like taking more of the players and doing like a sister team kind of, and trying to trade them so they can eventually go to the main team at some point. At least for Valiant wise, and if I need to speak only for Valiant, like this is the answer I could give you right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard enough to run one Overwatch League team well, to run 2 Overwatch League teams well. Exactly. Like, you would need twice as many resources potentially. And how much value do you really get out of it, right? Like, I think that's like the big point that most teams would make. It's why Spitfire this season doesn't have 12 players, right?
Shock is the only team with 12 players currently.
Yeah, Shock is the only team with 12 players, and I think Krusty has like a specific way of like idea of how to run that, but I just haven't seen it be successful. I think you need a lot of staff or just be willing to sacrifice that players won't get as much attention. Like Spitfire, I think obviously rumors that players are just like unhappy with playtime, right? Like you have 12 really talented players on one team, you're not going to get playtime. There are people who are better off, and they prune to the better like 8, right? Or 7. They just cut off the people who they didn't think were as good, and then they ended up with a much better team because of it. There were less like internal issues, less questions, more efficient practice with that core.
I think it depends as well on players management. Like, if you don't really feel like part of the team, or like you're doing like 6 hours of screen of rankeds like a day, and you're just doing that, it's kind of difficult. Like, the only player that I see like being like making himself part of the team is Pre in Outlaws. I don't really know much what he's doing in the team, but he feels like, and for instance, he's still like there in season 2. He's like surely participating in like strategy talk, trying to be there for the team. Like, this is where you would look at someone that it doesn't really consider either to be a starter or a sub. And like, you don't have this in every player. I think every player is coming to Overwatch League expect to be like the superstar, or at least be a starter, and not deserve to be a sub. And till we reach like the maximum amount of team in the league, and we have like established people, I would think about Truffaut, Soon, Carpe, like any players that are really good and will be good for the time being. Like, some players won't go into the watching and say, hey, I want to be a reserve for like 1 or 2 years, try to learn everything that the starter team or the starter players are doing, and at some point maybe make it to the main team. Like, this is not how it goes right now, and that's why we can't really go for a 6-man roster. a 12-man roster. And as well, as dpei was saying, you already have troubles managing an Overwatch team, because I still think that we didn't reach the gap, at least the potential of having a full functional coaching staff, having like staff in like specific positions. And obviously if 6 is already like not like, you don't have a full coaching staff, you will need like even more people for 6 other people or 6 other players and manage them. So I think at some point we can see 12-man roster and see like internal scrims, like a perfect structure, etc. But I think we need the team to be established first, having player established in the league, and at some point you can bring talent, make them come to your team, develop them like Valiant was like in the idea of doing, and at some point you can have a really good environment. And maybe the academy teams at some point will be the idea. We still didn't reach every Blizzard plan on what they want to do to really know if going for 12-man roster now it's like a good idea. Maybe you can just use your academy team to like do internal scrims, develop talent, make them to Overwatch League, blah, blah, but it will be a long debate if we go on like all the specific stuff. So it's
Sure. Okay. Yeah, go on.
Oh, I'm just noting, yeah, you just can't jump infrastructural steps, and like if the scene is here, you can't just jump to here. You maybe want to be a couple steps ahead, but like we see how esports and just things like don't necessarily work out. Funding might not work out. You can't just jump to being like NFL standards where you have a practice squad and you have 100 people on your team and then your coaching staff is twice the size. It's just unrealistic to do so, and the value you get out of that is relative to other people spending less is like important to note. That's all I wanted to add to that.
Okay. Right, daemoN, I notice your team has no Koreans on it. Is there a reason for this? I mean, Koreans proven to be pretty good in the Overwatch League thus far.
I mean, they did, but on the case of Paris, I think it was more of an idea of like giving the opportunity to like some talents in Europe to shine in Overwatch League. And I think it was like, I think it's a possibility right now, even more like going through like now 2 months of like screening and like art training. Like I can see people coming from ground zero in contenders, making it to Overwatch League and be like, yeah, I want to succeed. I want to be like a really good player. And we don't really like mind any ethnicity. Like if I see a good player, I want to take him. But in this case, like for Paris Eternal, I think it's a beautiful project trying to give like Western opportunity and see them shine in Overwatch League. I don't think we need like any Koreans or Japanese or like special ethnicity in the team. I just wanted to like build a core that would function together. And right now, this is the case. We have people grinding for like at least the idea of victory and excellence by being consistent, following the training path, following of the coaching staff that are really good. Like I have really good members right now, either both as players or coaching staff. So I think we just like go with what we wanted to have and see as an experiment and as well of an important project on the long term to see how it goes.
Okay, couldn't afford him, got it right.
No, I mean they did obviously. They're paying a decent amount for some of the Overwatch League players like Soon and Shadowburn. Where are you guys like? How are you guys feeling right now? Because on paper you look at your roster and you think at least in a GOATS meta that you're looking pretty good. Obviously, a lot of your players were competing in European contenders on Eagle and other famous like GOATS teams, basically. So. In the GOATS meta, a lot of the actual Overwatch League players don't have much experience with it unless they were playing it in the World Cup. And I would argue that even at the World Cup, the GOATS meta was not as anywhere near as developed as it is right now. But a lot of these guys are coming with like months and months of GOATS play under their belt. So are you feeling confident heading into the season with this roster? Because the Euro GOATS scene was sort of considered the best.
Yeah, not only like just to mention, I think we can be a really good tank team, but as well as a DPS, and that's why like again I joined DP in the process. Like we basically, since the meta can change anytime, you need to have like specific players for specific meta, and I think when you build a team, you need to have like every people's strength and like colors, which I call colors. Like some people will be better in the tank meta, some people will be better in the DPS, and I think we can cover every meta right now depending on the player composition. It's the idea of playing every player's strengths. And right now we know if the meta obviously go for tanks, which kind of strength we want to put in our team. And right now we're feeling good, obviously, because we have people like Felix, which is Fefe from Eagle Gaming, that were like the pioneers of the GOATS meta. Like they were the one training it for months and months and months. At some point, the meta came for them, and they were like what we would consider the best team in the world, at least on this meta. And obviously he's adding a lot of knowledge and like training process, so we can be not only like a really good tank team, but maybe one of the best in the Overwatch League. And obviously, even if the players in Europe like most likely play tank for a lot of time, we needed this knowledge. And Felix is adding, and obviously we have Kaikai and Seita adding like a lot of knowledge as well in it and expertise. And we're just feeling good right now, like from Scream's experience and from the way we want to do training and like either inside of the game or outside of the game, we're doing pretty good from what made people think on the paper from players' perspective and like what we could bring as a team.
So you guys, like when we look at this roster, a lot of, I think the common consensus coming into the season is that you guys picked up some strong B-teamers from Overwatch League and some strong A-teamers from contenders. So you sort of, you know, you don't really have like the top level roster. But I think what people look at is you guys do have a pretty amazing coaching staff, because coming into the season, like you're coming from the Valiant, Feifei's coming with the GOATS experience. Seita is extremely well respected within the European scene for his time in Giganti. And I think the primary why he wasn't the only reason why Seita wasn't a head coach of a team last season was because he like doesn't want to leave Finland for whatever reason. And then you've got Kaikai as well, who's had success, especially knowing like, you know, doing player coaching and one-on-one coaching. So you guys put together like a pretty strong and diverse set of coaches to go with this. What was the process of getting all these people on the Eternal?
I think on my idea going forward, obviously I have like a lot of stuff to prove. Just like a 22 years old head coach trying to like build like a strong team for season 2. So obviously what I wanted is like go with like as much as excellence as possible. And like, I don't really mind any people I try to get on the team as long as I consider like them like really good. And when I was looking forward to be the coaching staff, that you don't have enough resources in the to build like this in the league right now, because there's no many good coaches. Like when I had the chance to see Seita opportunity, Feifei opportunity, and Kaikai opportunity, I was like, if you build them together, like everyone has their own strengths. Again, this is the same thing as players for the coaching staff. Like as you say, Seita is always respected for some stuff, Kaikai for some stuff, Feifei for some stuff. If you build that together as a team, it can like grow really strong, because if we know how to work together, if we know how to implement like the structure path, like everything that needs the team to go forward, I think you can bring something good. So obviously trying to move forward in the process of recruitment, I was like, okay, this guy can do this and this, but he can't do this, so I will pick this guy that can do this and this. And in the end, what people consider ended up with like a superstar coaching staff. But yeah, it all depends on the way we work. And like the process of it was like seeing the coach philosophy, and everyone on the coaching staff right now are like passionate, really passionate, like the game on how it is and how they can like coach people and work as a team. So I don't know. I just feel like I can't really have any reasoning or like any path I can share right now. But the idea was like just getting the best people for the team. And I think we ended up pretty well on this case.
So also, you picked up some new coaches this season, dpei, assistant coaches to help you out. So I've been talking to John Galt. He's like a new person, but you're adding.
You fucked that one up, Monty. You were supposed to say who is John Galt.
Who is John Galt? Yeah, yes, I know.
So you ask him the question. Right? So,
I did.
Whatever.
I already fucked it up. So who is John Galt? That's the unanswerable question, but
yeah, who is he? Who is he, dpei?
I mean, John's, we were just like going through like stacks of resumes, and really I got like filtered down like what my GM and what upper management thought were like the best picks. And I was like, I needed more, because like we interviewed a bunch of people, and like daemoN said, like it is actually really hard to find good coaches. Like I think coaches are maybe one of the more like hard things to evaluate, but it's really hard to like, there's a lot of useless coaches probably in Overwatch League. I don't know who exactly is, but like I have a strong feeling that there's a lot of useless coaches in Overwatch League. So I would rather have no one than a useless coach, or like someone like that, right? Like, so finding someone who was like a really good fit and would add a lot of value. I think John, he's like clearly a very like grinder. He's like just a grinder. He will tell me exactly why. And like we had like a test, right? Like an interview test, and he immediately discerned that one of the players wasn't like should have been seriously considered. Like we were saying, like evaluate these 3 players or something like that. And then right off the bat, he's like, I don't even want to talk about this guy. And I was like, good, because no one else said that. So
I think it was the whole time, right?
It wasn't a trap. It was still like one. If they like, it was like kind of a bait question because the person was popular, or like had a good reputation, and like, right. So like if they like looked at the footage and then were like, this guy's good, I just don't know. Like I just like mentally stopped the interview there. It was like I tried to get value out of the interview, but if you answered that wrong, essentially, I think like that was like kind of a just weed out question.
Fucking hell, the mind games are intense in this interview.
But he said like he like kind of shortened the conversation about the person, and so like I could tell he really knew his stuff, and like I saw some of the other like he had like some YouTube videos, and I could tell that he really did know his stuff and that he like really grinded his way through. And so I was really impressed with that, and so it was very easy and a natural fit. Like we talked about coaching philosophy, kind of like how he wants to do things. He was head coach on his various teams, so he has like a lot of experience in that department as far as like interacting with players, when to be strict, when not to be strict, when to be soft, stuff like that. And he just seemed like a really good natural fit into our coaching staff. And we're like a very discussion-based coaching staff. We're just always talking about everything, like what needs to be done, like the plan moving forward, and just like a lot of in-depth strategy things. And he had a good understanding of micro and macro, maybe macro less, because I realize now, like coming out of OWL, like not many people knew about the macro in OWL, like especially coaching staff. It was hard for them if they were coaching contenders, they're focused on that patch or their region, right? It was hard for them to like really evaluate OWL's meta. And obviously in scrims, we just see a ton more of the evolution of the meta, so we have a better understanding of why things are. But even then, John like learns very quickly. It's very clear that he grinds his way through things, so he just fit perfectly into what we wanted. And specifically, he's like feeling kind of the more one-on-one, like the micro coaching, like in terms of gameplay stuff. He's probably like 80% micro, 20%. Everyone has to be able to do micro and macro because both feed into each other, right? I'm mostly macro, so I deal with like rotations, compositions, point A defenses, stuff like that. And then Tim is like our flex in between. He'll just bounce around between like, you imagine like at the start of a stage, like the macro is much more important, and then as the meta gets figured out, he's more of the micro, like figuring out the nuances of like if Genji's really good, like we got to work with our Genji player type thing. So I think we have like a good system set up there, and I think John like is a natural and flexible coach too, for all those things that we really wanted.
Aren't you concerned that if you don't pay him enough, that over the course of the season he's just going to stop giving you strategies and then disappear?
Is this? I don't know the book. Is this like? Is this
it's an illusion stuff. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like I don't know Ayn Rand.
It's all right.
I'm not going to pretend to know it either.
What is the reference?
That's like a famous book that he's a character in. Yeah.
He told me he doesn't like. Not that I forgot if he said he liked the book or not, but he said like he just always chooses a name based off a book he's reading, like a screen name off the book he's reading. And he's like, I don't even identify with like Ayn Rand or anything, but like I just chose this name and it kind of stuck, is what he told me. And
it's just great for Ayn Rand jokes. What can I say? I appreciate it.
I don't know. I'm not a reader, so I don't know the Atlas Shrugged, so sorry for no literary references.
Well, what about then if we ask, like, let's talk about some other teams in the league and get your take on them. So a couple of teams I wanted to ask about were some of the teams that have gotten some of the hype within the community. So Monte referenced one, which is obviously one of the new expansion teams, which is the Hangju Spark, and this is a team where these aren't actually even the most famous Korean players. These were some of the players who were in contenders. Some of them even, I think, like one guy played in China or something. There's like a few different players. What do you think of this team? Like, why are they being so highly touted? Has your team scrimmed them? Were they a team that have already shown something behind the scenes? What would you say?
We only scrimmed them a couple times, and it was when we were starting out, so it was hard to evaluate because we were like messing up on a lot of things. They were trying new things too, which was like confusing to us. I don't have like a good read on them, but what I will say is like the general like floor of the Overwatch League has raised a ton. Like all the existing teams added a ton, and like all the expansion teams look really good. I think this season's like super competitive, and everyone can shift between like probably like 1 to like 10 is like very malleable depending on the meta and just momentum and stuff. But I can't speak on the Spark specifically just because I haven't scrimmed them recently.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of scrims against them, and yeah, like dpei said, they try new things. They don't really care about the beta. They're just doing their own thing. And I don't know, it's like synergy and stuff like that. They seem really complete as a team, and like skill-wise as well. They have like some players like Bazzi, for instance, really impressed me skill-wise. And obviously, when you have again a core of players that match one like superstar player, if we could call it like that, obviously they're doing well. And I think this is the case with Spark as well of the branding that is just crazy. But yeah, overall, there's just like a really good team going forward of season 2, and I think that will surprise a lot of people. And as well as Shanghai Dragons, I actually match Spark and Dragons in the same like pack. I think they're like two really good teams, not really focused on like what other people are doing. They're just doing their own thing, and they're really good at it. And right now, this is like the case. I suppose the same feeling for like everyone.
I think.
And to discuss like what Hangzhou and where their players came from, it's like yes, a lot of these players. I mean, X6 did pretty well in contenders. IDK is coming from Lucky Future, which was the team that actually the Korean team that crushed Contenders China. And you know, they have some players from Seven as well, which didn't do too well in Contenders. They did pretty badly, but there were some gems on that roster. And I think what really is interesting about Hangzhou is it feels like they picked up like all these diamonds in the rough. It's like when Seoul picked up Fleta, where you're like, this was a great player on a bad team. That's how I feel like Hangzhou, except they did it with a bunch of players. And, you know, Godsby and Bazzi are both extremely impressive DPS players. IDK is a very good main support player and shot caller for the team. And so I think they are going to bring a lot of experience and be quite strong. And they, as from what I've seen and what I've heard from the other teams, including here, they're not afraid to be experimental. And I don't think we're just going to see goats from them. Let's put it that way.
Okay. What about then a team which, for obvious reasons, does already have hype around it is the Shock, because as we said, they've got a full roster. They've added all these names over the first season and then even some people in the off season. So what do you think of the San Francisco Shock? Like, this was a team that also had like scrim hype, basically.
We haven't played them in scrims. Like, for some reason, Seoul and Shock like refused to scrim us like even a month out from from the season. I don't know. We can't scrim them, but just like looking
because
from the outside in,
you're playing them in your first matches.
Yeah, but I think like the first week you're pretty experimental in what you're doing, and there's no way you have like the meta like figured out like January 2nd when the whatever.
Sure,
but
I agree, but I understand what
yeah. Shock to me looks like London 2.0. Like they look like they just mass talent in one team, mass individual talent on one team, and I imagine it's just going to get pruned off as the season goes up, either like actually or just like implicitly, right? Like just perma-benched like X number of players, and I think that's what it's going to go towards. And I think they have like the highest amount of talent. Last season, I thought Spitfire was definitely the team to beat. Everyone was saying Nixel at the start, but I thought Spitfire just had the raw amount of talent, and no matter which way they went with their talent, like their players, they would end up with like a high potential team. And I think Shock is going with that same route. And I think, I mean, I don't know about their team play. I don't know about their coaching. I don't know really much about them as a whole, but I think they do have like a ton of individual talent, proven meta agnostic talent as well. Like their dive should be even scarier. I feel like if their goats looks good now, then their dive should be insane with Striker and Architect, right? So I think that they're probably a force to be reckoned with. I think their power ranking is really high, but I don't think it's unjustified at all.
Yeah, on my case, we had the opportunity to scrim them, so glad. But yeah, overall, like as a team, they're like pretty good. They've been doing a lot of stuff from what I can tell right now, but at least it's looking really good for them. And as dpei said, I don't think this is unjustified. Like the power ranking, I think they can do really good. Maybe Christie is gonna be balling and like play every player's like for the role for stages, but just need to see where it goes. Like again, like I agree on the fact that it's like really hard to go for a 12-man roster, even more if you have like every one of the 12 is like really individually talented. Again, just need to see how it goes. But right now they're feeling really good, and like especially Sinatra, like for what I've seen, is a really good player. Like again, really mechanically is great. So maybe he's gonna impress us on season 2. At least I just wish him the best, because right now he's doing great as a player.
I heard, and I don't know if this is true, that their management is like forcing like a 3-3 English Korean split. Moth obviously gets the one spot because he's the only main support, but I like heard this was true. If that is like enforced by management for whatever reason, like that could cause problems, like either internally or
as in it would be
anything.
like a hockey line where the 3 players come in for this game and then there's another 3 for another game.
No, like they're forcing like, and this was just like a. Like I don't know where the rumor came from. I just heard this, like that they need to have 3 English players playing at any given.
Just for the overall. Right,
like I don't know, for marketing stuff, because like I don't understand their lineups in stage 4, for example. Like why are we running like Baby Bay on Widow when Architect's like better and like more flexible and stuff like that? It didn't make sense to me. But it looked like they were trying to get like even play time. Maybe there was something precursor. Like they weren't making playoffs. Definitely, maybe they didn't optimize for stage playoffs, because they went 5-5 in stage 4, I think. Or 6-4. I think they were 5-5 or something. They didn't have like the greatest showing. I didn't think they were like, they had still a lot of talent, but like they didn't seem like all together there. They had like bits and parts that were improving, certainly, and coaching takes a long time. But I was just noting like maybe there's some management influence there.
I don't know. It's hard to go with. Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think so, because as far as I know, why Krusty went to San Francisco was because he would have complete control over the roster.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. So yeah, that was like conflicting statements, but. Again, these are just like rumors.
I would be surprised. I would be surprised if that was true.
Maybe he just gets complete control over 33% of the roster.
Fair enough.
Problem solved.
I also think, like, at least at the start of the season, isn't Violet not playing the first few games? Is that right?
Is he banned for?
I forget if he was part of that suspension.
Maybe,
or not. He might not be. Let me just check real quick.
By the way, at any point in time, the actual best investment, except in your own team, would be just to pay Korean journalists to look up any match fixing or boosting of all other Korean players in the league. Like, that would be the most effective way in the short term to gain wins in the Overwatch League. Just get people suspended. just put a bounty out there on the heads of any Korean players.
It's not a bad team. Just like research the team you're playing against. It's like, oh well, their main team can't play. Like,
there's got to be dirt on him. You just got a big board with all wires and stuff connecting pictures to evidence.
Yeah. So Violet is suspended for the first 2 games, and you can't play Decay for the first 3 games because he's not 18, and Ripa on your team is suspended for 5 games. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, this was. I don't know how that whole process is done, but I mean, Blizzard's the governing body, the sole governing body of the Overwatch League, so you can't really argue against certain things. Because like I thought I like knew certain players boosted. I think there's like going on like certain timelines of stuff too. Like I don't know exactly how that works, and like boosting regionally has like different consequences, I feel like, but I don't know how they're like. It feels more arbitrary in terms of their decision making and their research, but yeah,
I kind of like vaguely ridiculous too, because you don't know when these guys were boosting, and if they were boosting in like 2016, like who cares? Honestly,
we should just have an amnesty. We start the Overwatch League. Anything before that, it's done. Move on.
It's just not well explained. I'm sure they have a system,
like a statute of limitations on boosting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you were a dirty booster 3 years ago, then it shouldn't matter.
Owned a company, right? And he was like, he was heralded as the Black Mirror. I mean, like, I don't know how harsh you want to be. I don't know if that was appropriate. I'm just noting like him and then OG got like different. Like it was just kind of weird, and like OG like boosted like once or twice or something, and Sato owned a company and he profited off his crimes because he got infamous from it. Like that seems kind of weird, right? That there's like a law in the US where you can't profit off your own crimes. That's like profiting off your own crimes out of the infamous.
It's not a crime, so it's against terms.
Yule agreement. Yeah, you got.
That's how gaslit this guy's been into the Blizzard world. It's actual crime. It's not even illegal. Like
they're indoctrinating us over here. We're getting awarded with the Yule over.
the boosting felons are put in jail.
It's illegal in Korea now, right? Like it's actually like a law.
Yeah, that's true. I think it is now it is.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, 30 games seems like a lot, but I was just like, it was kind of weird. I don't know where these numbers come from.
And to be honest, this is really unfortunate for Gladiators because I truly think that Ripa is a really good fake support. I think he's going to be one of the shining stars in like season 2, from what I've seen. So yeah, I mean, 5 games is a pretty tough punishment, but at least when it's going to be lifted, you will have the liberty to do whatever you want, and it will be the moment for Ripa to show his skills.
Yeah. I think something that's super underrated is like EU flex supports. No one talks about EU flex supports, but EU flex supports are actually just nuts. Like you just have like from last season, I think Gray is really good, Shaz is really good, Rip is really good. Like you just like there were other people that didn't get picked up from first season. I think Korean flex supports are obviously really good. Like but EU flex supports I think are like the hidden gold mine of like just a region that has really strong flex supports, really like smart flex supports in particular. Maybe less mechanical, but like really smart for sure. But yeah, sorry to cut off whoever I cut off.
No, I was just gonna say like it's very interesting to see these like suspensions come down, and I do think that these are more reasonable suspensions because we can talk about Sato, like being, running this company, which apparently he may not have done. I don't know. It's confusing. I don't know what he did or didn't actually do. But in any case, getting banned for 3/4 of a season is actually crazy in a professional sport. And not that I'm saying at all that I agree with the way the NFL does things, but like Ezekiel Elliott was banned for 6 games for some like pretty heinous shit. And so, but the equivalent would be to be banned for 12 games, right? Which would be 3/4 of an NFL.
I feel like
season.
the NFL should be harder on that stuff. Like I've seen more ridiculous.
Look, man, I agree with you.
Those are like legitimate crimes. Like in
but here's the point though, dpei, is like logically the reason why they aren't is because first of all, you do also get punished in real life where it's actually a crime. Like I mean, again, not to get like gaslit, but the NFL
I guess you don't
actually,
get like double penalty, double jeopardy.
No, but in a way, like first of all, you do get, as I say in that example, like if you commit domestic violence, you will absolutely get prosecuted for that in real life anyway. But also the other reason why is because logically, why would the owners, bearing in mind the business of the NFL is we're all trying to profit as owners, why would they want each other's star players to get kicked out of the game? Like even if I'm the team playing you in the big NFL showdown on Sunday, I want your star player to be there as well, so the ratings are sick. So actually, it's kind of like a cynical move, but that's the reason why in sports, they don't kick you out. Like the best example ever is probably mixed martial arts, right? Logically, to use performance-enhancing drugs in that sport is not only cheating in the most blatant manner, but it's potentially like immoral because you might kill a person because you have more strength than them, or you've recovered better than you should do. But what's mad is even in that sport, mate, where even if you actually dope, they don't ban you for life unless you've done it something mad like 5 times. Like you can do it 2 or 3 times and they still just keep giving you like 1-year ban, 2-year ban. It's like the whole point is it's actually kind of wild that this is where game developers trying to be like the dads of the fucking kids playing kind of intersects with the sports angle, because I'm pretty sure most teams would want lighter sentences generally for this sort of thing, like I think nobody agrees with it, but just I think most people don't want it to interact with the esports side, because it's kind of a separate thing.
I mean, there was some research done on it too. I forgot like the article I read, but like people don't like the fact that like NFL is like associated with like these like legitimate crimes, right? Like
sure.
And like things like the NBA are growing as more of like an international sport because they have like a more like fun and loving culture. I don't know really how to describe it, but they have like a more wholesome.
To be fair, one is throwing a ball through a hole, the other one's hitting a guy in the side of his head. They are sort of different spots,
maybe some of it
one of them lends itself, you're right, better to sort of like, let's go to Bible school and then have a shoot round afterwards. You don't exactly like go and tackle the vicar, do you? Like, I'm with you right up until the distinction I've got to make there. So
yeah, I'm just noting like it does have long-term effects, right? Like people like just people booze 24/7 or toxic 24/7, and then Blizzard does nothing about it, and they're all in the league. Like it sets a bad precedent.
I agree. You've got to do something. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just I kind of agree with Monty. Like banning for someone for 3/4 of a whole season seems
ridiculous.
That seems a bit egregious,
Like I don't.
There were some Koreans saying that wasn't enough, too, right?
Look,
and other people.
I don't care if he was the God Emperor boosting. Like Sato didn't deserve a 30-game ban.
Isn't like at Dopa banned in league like permanently for boosting or something like that?
That was different.
He was, but he had also literally like he did it as a career for many years and blatantly did it as well to like flaunt it in the face of the people.
He was like literally like moving to China to like win win races.
Well, I've got a better one than that, Monty. What Dopa would actually do? Because here's the thing. The reason why, by the way, dpei, I'll just give this little story for people who don't know because it's an interesting interesting story. Like normal boosters, like in Overwatch, the reason why pro players do it is because this is just before there was a big pro scene and they didn't make that much money, so they did it on the side. The reason why in League this particular player was very rare is because it's not an exaggeration. He actually appears to be one of the most talented people to ever play League of Legends, but he also figured out as a result that since it's so hard to climb the Korean ladder because there's so many good players there, he's actually better than most of the pros in the Korean ladder. So what he would do is he wouldn't just boost people, he would boost his own accounts. He would boost multiple of his own accounts into the top of solo queue. He would rename some of the accounts to like amazing boosting services. Like that would be the name of the fucking account that's like number 3 in all of Korea.
I've seen that.
And so the point is, he wasn't just even a guy like on the side, like, hey, if you give me the right money, I'll boost you. He was the guy who's like paying for skywriting, like, Fat Tony can kill anyone you need in your town. Contact 155. It's like he was that blatant. So this guy was a baller, I have to say. Like, I kind of understand why he's banned forever. You know, like.
But he was considered even better than Faker at some point. Right?
The problem is it's only in solo queue that we don't know what he would be like as a competitive player. But it's true though, yes, he was like
it was really tragic crazy. Too, because we almost found out. So the saddest part about Dopa is that he actually qualified while Doa and I were casting there for a season of champions with a team. It became called Team Dark because they banned their previous name, which is, by the way, one of my favorite names of all time, which was in Korean to English, it translated approximately as "We came to slay the peasants." So they qualified for champions with this name, with Dopa on the team. Dopa gets banned before he can ever play in champions, which is still like, I deeply regret that this happened at that time because I just wanted one fucking game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, we came to slay the peasants. The OGN forced them to change their name to Team Dark, and then Team Dark ended up being the only team ever kicked out of champions because they made a troll composition of all of Cloud Templar, one of the casters and former pro players, all of his famous picks. They just picked all of them because at the time there was a tradition that teams would do when he was casting of like selecting, like flashing hovering all his champions that he used to play. So they just picked all 5 of them, and then they went and invaded all with like smite at level 1 into the enemy jungle and all.
They got wrecked
completely. They intentionally threw a game. So that's the story of Team Dark, and we came to slay the peasants, which is still an amazing name.
I think I would just like to see like I hate when like greatness is just like kind of pushed aside. I mean, he had I guess he had his own like intentionally kind of like screwed himself, right? Like he clearly didn't want to compete.
Well, in his case, he
just made more money doing.
You have to realize this is back in the day when like a top Korean pro might make like $30,000, and this guy was probably making like 10K a month just boosting. So to him, he even was just like, why would I bother? That's why everyone actually sort of admires the guy in sort of like a villainous fashion. It's like, you know, if someone really is like a mobster and they make it away for 50 years, you don't agree with their crimes, but you do sort of tip your hat like, wow, how the fuck did you do that? Like, it's kind of sick in a way, right?
Also, there's that picture of him that is one of the most baller pictures, which is just him sitting in front of a pile of money. So,
here's another detail for anyone who doesn't know, because the story's pretty good, right? So what happened was, in China, where they have not only like multiple of the servers for solo queue, they even have like a super server that you have to already be like qualified to a certain rank to get into. And they made a competition, this streaming service in China. I can't remember if it was like DouYu or someone, one of those famous ones. They made a competition, right? Whoever is top of the Chinese ladder on this particular day gets $100,000. So the Dopa guy is such a god. He moves to China, sets himself up, starts doing it. He's even streaming while he's doing the climb, by the way. And because he's streaming, all these Chinese people who you already know, like the relationships between China and Korea anyway, they're all trying to like purposely get into his game to int the game and like lose the match for him. And even it's like some shit of a movie, and he still wins this competition. And when he wins, instead of just like sending him the money or giving him a check, which is like the esports way, they just give him like a silver platter with like all the money in like 10K stats. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, look it up on Google or something. Just look up.
I looked it in our Discord chat here, Thorin, so they could look at it. But the best part is like he's wearing like a suit, and he's like a handsome guy. He's like a good-looking guy. So he looks like there's this fucking like James Bond villain with like this like silver platter full of money. It's just amazing.
It was went crazy, to be honest.
But yeah, luckily there's not as extreme as that. So all I'm saying is, listen,
Exactly.
you guys might think this Saddle guy's bad. He is but an amateur.
Anyway, needless to say, after living through the apto or dopa or whatever you want to call him, because it's just anagrams of those letters that he uses as his IDs. So in the beginning, he was called apto, and I guess people call him dopa now. But anyway,
I don't know.
After living through this shit, like anything that these Overwatch pros do seems pretty mild by comparison.
It's like comparing a gangster to like Al Capone or something.
Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I fucking love Apto. I'm super sad, but it's just like he was just incredibly disruptive in the scene, and like even like the aftershocks of his existence, even in the professional scene with Team Dark, was just amazing.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm gonna hit the restroom really quick. Sorry.
All right.
So we should probably not talk about League of Legends. So how did you do tryouts, Demon, for the Paris Eternal? What was your process when you were assembling these players?
Basically, what we did was the data. It was kind of complicated because, like, you know, I was in Valiant. The signing of Paris were late, and at the same time, my signing therefore was late. So Max, which was my general manager, ended up like doing trials, which he could have think what I would have done. And at some point when I had the opportunity to join Paris and be officially signed, I had the opportunity to watch those trials, see the votes, etc., and pick the roster depending on it. So I had coaches being trialed as well at the same time because he wanted to see what could be my assistant coaches. Seita was one running the lobby, giving the opportunity to like have multiple compositions so you could see what was good on DPS, tanks, blah, 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 like cover every heroes. And at some point I was like, this guy is good, this guy is good. For the input, I was really afraid of finding a main support because I know the market was really low on this position. I was like, what am I gonna do? And I ended up watching like Cruz. I had heard Ludi was good, but I didn't have any expectation and no expectation for Cruz whatsoever. And when I saw the first game, I was like, this guy is really good. And second game, this guy is really good. Make signing, thanks. And that would be it. Like, and for the rest, I just tried to like see which piece I needed. So for the main tanks, I had like 2 tanks playing like having different strengths and could fit like any meta. If I needed one or the 2 at the same time, doesn't really matter. Same goes for the DPS. I needed like special talent. And same for the fake support, like basically just trying to build what was necessary depending on meta and what the team needed and make it as a real team. So obviously there's like 6 players playing, but at the same time, if it's like 4 people on the bench, if I can call it this way, because I don't like it this way, like they're still part of the team. There's still structure trying to give them the opportunity to grind, evolve, have kind of an evolution, and because we need them. As I'm saying to them, we need that at some point. So like just trying to have like the strengths and just playing like really focus over the team and what is needed at which time, basically.
Okay. Is it difficult to actually manage comms in your team? You have a very sort of mixed bunch of players.
Not really, because even if the accent sometimes can be a problem, we still don't have like someone that really don't know English. So in the end, the communication is pretty fluid. For the comparison with Valiant, I think as an expansion team and with players that doesn't have like that much big experience on high level Overwatch, like our communication right now is a weakness because it's a weakness in like every team, but as well as strength. Like the evolution that we have so far in communication, like the structure of it and the like how it happens in games, it's so good right now for players that are of this caliber. It's actually so good, and I think it's making us like a really good team right now.
Okay. dpei, what are your actual thoughts on how you set up communications when you have Koreans and non-Koreans? Like, what has the challenge been like in that sense? Because obviously you've only added more Koreans as the time's gone on in Gladiators.
In game, we have like set structures, set keywords. Like I think our communication, at least, like even I always kind of thought this, but like John helped confirm it. At least that we have like top tier communication inside the game. Our communication structure is like really well thought out and is followed really well. So it always just looks like we're doing one thing together. And if we're not, we're just like telling our players to always do it. So it's kind of like ingrained into them, especially after season 1. And for the new players, it's easy because if 5 other people are doing it, you have to do it. It's just like really easy to follow. So I think our communication inside the game is really good, but communication outside of the game, we have 2 bilingual like coaching staff members. One's like a translator, one's like a manager, and then Bishu's obviously bilingual as well. So out of game, we're really able to talk about issues more so than maybe other teams. But translation, like things might take twice as long, but we have to like budget for that time, right? Like our breaks are maybe a bit longer than other teams because we have to talk for a little bit longer. We kind of just said, however long it's going to take in English, just assume it's going to take that long in Korean to translate and explain as well. So I think it's like a gap outside of the game, and like obviously getting to know players, like building a personal rapport with players is a little bit harder. Culturally and language barrier wise, it's a little harder, but I think it's just a sacrifice you make, you know, for skill across the board. Like whether they were Chinese, Korean, like daemoN said, we don't really discriminate by any nationality. It looks weird because we have like 3 Finns, 3 Koreans, or whatever, but like we just got talent where we thought talent was. And
Did you not think that you needed a Korean coach? Pretty much, you know, most of the teams had one in some sense. A lot of people who had Korean players wanted Korean coach. You didn't want a Korean coach as well?
It was something we considered. It was just we couldn't find like any Korean bilingual speaking coaches. I think if they were full Korean, there were like our management came from league and they were in P1 before, and they like noted some Korean coaches are a little more politically savvy, and like they just didn't want to deal with it. But I was like personally fine with it because if I have the faith of my management and my other coaching staff, it's not a problem. But it's just finding someone bilingual. Like if I also have to explain, like a lot of coaching is just like discussion, right, daemoN? You're just constantly talking about problems and how to attack problems, whether it's with a player, strategy, whatever it may be. And if that has to be communicated, then it's just like you're like twice as gimped, I guess. Like from the player side, if they're not getting like strategy handed down to them, like that's a big thing with mixed teams. I think like they have to get strategy like more handed down to them in general, because it's just a lot harder to like do the small in-game adjustments that you need to do that normally like a one language roster can do. Your coaching staff at the very least has to be united. So I mean, like we were toying with the idea. We interviewed some people, but we couldn't find the right fit, both in terms of fluency and competency, I will say. So it was like on the list. We were like considering just like even just other bilingual coaches or like close like Korean players that maybe had previous experience before and I could speak English, but we just couldn't find the right fit at the time, and like translation is just going to be what we're going to have to do for now. But I think in the future, obviously that would be nice. But we have like a manager who's really Kez is like 31 years old. He was a League of Legends pro. Like he's like yeah, he's like older too. So like I think that's very important in Korean culture. And he like understands his role as like the like kind of like father figure in a way, the big brother figure, the like performance coach type of thing. And he did a good job of it last season, and we have like a lot of trust in him as well. And our new translator, Dave, is doing a really good job too, growing into his role.
Okay. Right. Shall we just pick a different... Right, what about this then? Since you referenced them earlier, daemoN, like the team that last season was obviously the joke of the league was the Shanghai Dragons, but they have massively overhauled the roster. And actually, as I alluded to, for example, I saw that there was a Korean guy who was like an ex-coach of the X6 gaming team from Korean contenders rather, who'd ranked them actually as he thought they might be the best in their conference. So a lot of people turn around this. Are you on the hype, daemoN? Is Shanghai Dragons going to be one of the top teams in the league?
Yeah, I'm obviously on the hype. Like, I really like this roster, but again, even like with Scream experience, I think it's really too early of myself to like make any ranking. I can't really know how the teams are going, and we saw it like last season. It's too difficult. There's too many factors and variables to take in consideration. But still, I think like Dragons can be like at least above top 10 and do like really good. Obviously, this is the safe like saying like just okay, they can be above top 10. That I can't really know for sure like if they're gonna be a really good team. But on the paper and from what I've seen in scrims, they have a good potential, like huge potential right now. So obviously, I'm on the hype train.
Do you think so, dpei? Are you similar sentiment or not?
I've scrimmed against them a little bit. I think their players are very the rest of Kongdu mixed with some other parts. They just ran weird shit. Like they ran weird comps that I thought were like really bad and didn't make a lot of sense, and like was easily beatable. But maybe that weirdness is like better in other metas. Just this meta is like a little bit more constrained, I will say, or like the counter plays are a lot more simple. But I didn't feel like scared of Shanghai, but like I could see them being good, but I don't necessarily see them being top tier. But it's hard to predict the future on that, given little like scrim experience against them. But they were just running weird shit for the most part, so it's really hard for me to evaluate. It just didn't make sense to me. But that doesn't make them necessarily bad. It could just be like stuff they were trying out on that day, you know?
So when you say teams are running weird shit, not that I am going to expect you to divulge anything that you've seen or what you're doing, but does weird shit, we need to define weird shit. Does weird shit mean anything that isn't GOATs right now? What are you guys thinking about the prevalence of GOATs at the start of the season versus other strategies?
daemoN, you want to tackle this one? I feel I'm probably going to err on the side of caution in terms of what.
I'll let you go with the answer.
I mean, like, GOATs is obviously very meta. Like, I think you at any single point in a map, you could be like, we could just go GOATs and it's probably fine. So there's some like variants of GOATs. There's some hard counters to GOATs. It depends on like parts of maps, like how it transitions to. Like, we were like thinking about like doing the counter GOATs comps, but it's like very hard to execute and like if other teams aren't doing it, you don't necessarily need to do it. You don't need to go to the next level if other teams aren't going to the next level, or you can just like learn to play around it and you can specialize in your comp, whatever it may be, like GOAT variant, something like that. So, I mean, I think you'll see a lot of GOATs in stage 1, but I think you'll see like variations of GOATs too, and you'll see like maybe some hard GOATs counters on just certain parts of maps. It'll just depend. But I think like if we had to say it's going to be a majority of GOATs, similar to like Dive, like you saw Dive in majority parts, but it was not uncommon to see like triple tank on like control.
Does it matter in terms of like team personnel? Like for example, we're just going to see like NYXL just going to run GOATs when Overwatch League starts. If it started tomorrow, even teams like that would run.
Yeah, I mean, Nixel should be very competent in GOATs still. Like they master metas, I will say. Like they aren't the fastest at picking stuff up, but they are like the fastest at mastering something. And so I think they'll be probably pretty good at GOATs. They have Nene, like who's like was an off-tank player, has a really good Zarya, and that immediately fills a hole where like I doubt Sabiobi or Pine would be like fantastic Zaryas compared to Nene, who like had off-tank experience, right? Just looking from the outside in, that seems more reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, New York right now, from what I've seen, is extraordinary. I mean, I'm kind of biased because I really like the team, but overall, like in game perspective, they're just so clean as a team. This is just insane.
To be fair, if they're a really good team, that's a very good reason to like them, which makes your bias actually entirely accurate and appropriate for your analysis. So, just saying.
Like we talk, like I guess when evaluating coaching staffs, like I thought Nixel and Boston, like scrimming them in season 1 at least, they had like the best well thought out strategies, and it was very clear that they were iterating on it. I think we were in that discussion. I think Valiant was in that discussion, but like I don't want to like if I had to say 2 top tier teams in terms of strategy, are just like it was clear, like even from the third person perspective, what they were working on. Like Nixel was very clear. And then Boston was clear. Even when things weren't going well for them in stage 4, like there was a thought process there. I think we beat them in stage 4 in terms of strategy. Like we were ahead of the meta, but that didn't mean that they weren't doing the right things. Like it was clear that they were doing things systematically and like figuring things out piece by piece and understood the core concepts. I think we were behind in like the first 3 stages. So like I'm not going to say we're better or worse or anything, but I think we're in this like just below them, maybe a little. And Boston, I think was like more in that conversation, but maybe Nixel for sure was top tier at it in terms of interpreting the meta and getting value from scrims.
What do you think of the new Boston?
I haven't scrimmed them recently, but like even last season, like Boston didn't show good results in the preseason, but they like, and I'm talking like preseason, like even before preseason started, like they didn't look that good, but they grew a lot. And I think that's a testament to their coaching staff, their players as well, and how driven they are. And I think everyone counts Boston out, but I think we'll see what happens this year. There'll be like a test to see actually, is their scouting system good? Are their coaches good? Was it crusty? Was it not? Like, I think this season is kind of going to be that narrative for, at least for me. Like, I'm trying to see who the strong coaching staffs are and like trying to like steal stuff from them, you know, like emulate stuff that they do. Boston, to me, like they proved, I think, season 1 that they did really well. Season 2, we have to see. But I think even if they don't do well stage 1, I expect like good things out of them even in stage 2, stage 3.
Yeah, they're the kind of team to prove wrong, to be honest. Like, and dpei was speaking about like Oberson was so clean in terms of strategy in season 1, but with the addition of Goomba, knowing him, I think they're gonna be really good. The only thing is like the way they handle their stuff, and like it goes as well for stage 1, because obviously like mistake from other team and like just excellence by being consistent, like Boston can apply it. Like, I don't know. I feel like on the paper and right now we can say, okay, Boston is this, but you can't really tell again. Like if they go into the season, they may like do some like really good stuff, really professional stuff, and like they may like grow stronger over the time. I think it's gonna be a long-term stuff, to be honest, for Boston.
Goats meta is also like one of the better metas in the fact that it's really team-based and there's less variance than say Dive, where like a Widow gets a headshot, a Widow doesn't. You stick a pulse bomb, you don't stick a pulse bomb. Like there's less variance in Goats, even though there's like still, I would say, a ton of variance, right? You hit a fire strike, suddenly you're down 1,000 HP in the fight, or like something like that. But I think if there was a meta for them to do well in and hopefully like disprove people, it would be in like more of the tank-based metas.
Well, I think mostly in the professional community, it's not that people dislike goats, because I think a lot of people really enjoy, you know, the technical aspects of it, the teamwork of it, the more MOBA-like qualities of it. It's just that nobody wants goats all the time, 24/7. It's like, I appreciate that goats is an option that people can go to. I think that's fascinating. But it should be more dynamic in terms of switching to that. And you know what? We're starting to get there, at least from the scrims that I've seen so far. It does look like people are experimenting with more different compositions. I do think we're still going to see goats 60 to 65% of the time. Not even necessarily because it's the greatest, but because so many teams have been playing it for so long at this point. It's a very comfortable fall for them. If they start to lose or they start to fall behind. So I am curious how it's going to go, and I assume we're probably going to see more nerfs to those heroes before stage 2. But at least in stage 1, I don't think it'll be as pervasive as it was in Contenders.
Okay.
I think there will be different variations of it too. Just like Contenders doesn't have like, say, the smartest players or the smartest coaches. So like there are just smaller things to break it, and small things if you find like we call it like the meta breaker, then it just like devolves back into Dive, right? Like, but it's really hard to find that meta breaker. And you talk about like the time people put into Goats. I think that's somewhat valid, but I think at the same time, like Goats is pretty hard to beat for good reasons, like transitional swaps, different parts of maps, the map pool, stuff like that.
Okay. Right, what about talking then, daemoN, about your old team, the Valiant? It's a team obviously everyone knows pretty well. At one point in time, by the end of the Overwatch League Season 1, they were one of the better teams. But interestingly, didn't really make big moves in the off-season. So what do you think of this team, the LA Valiant? Or as I call it, Kareev and his friend run an Overwatch team.
Okay. So I think Valiant, like at least when we changed, like we had Costa and going forward, like the team thing, that was the first time, obviously, like it's high level competitive for the first time for me, but I had this sentiment of being in a real team. So it means that everyone was like back together, like having like this professional synergy and work ethics. And we could move forward with this like consistency and therefore excellence by having this kind of team environment. And I think it goes by the organization philosophy, Noah's philosophy, trying to like build talent and trying to create like kind of an environment where like it's not really focused on getting talents, like huge talent, huge superstar, and like make a big superstar team. It's more about like trying to fit the right piece together and make a team. And I think this is why they moved forward with the idea of like enough, like kind of a slow off season, if we can say it this way, from the objective perspective. But I think for them, it was more about keeping the same core, keeping the same idea of having a building team, and just add the people that they really need to make it even bigger. For instance, Cookie is not really like that superstar of a player. Like, it's just someone that has like really interesting ideas to give, interesting gameplays as well, and just fit the team on even more on the idea of like making a great packed team, like with solidity inside or outside of the game. And same goes for the ad of like KSF, which is like a great player with a huge talent, but needs to be developed. Like, it's kind of a raw diamond. Like, they just need to like polish and just see how it goes. But yeah, I think this is just the idea of Valiant right now, going forward with like a consistent, like solid roster, or like the good core that makes it as a team right now. if it makes sense. Sorry if it did that.
I understood. dpei, what do you think? Valiant.
I think they lost like 2 big parts of their coaching staff with daemoN and Gumba, actually. And I think I talked about mixed teams and I talked about strategy being handed down. From my understanding of that team, Fate is a big part of that team in terms of strategy and shot calling. And I think
Gumba's still there.
Gumba's on.
Oh, he's
Boston.
on Boston now. Yeah.
I don't actually know who the replacements are. I'm looking at it right now. I think it's Stoop, and then that's the only strategic. Yeah, that's the only strategic.
They do have more coaches now.
I'm just looking at
who they are, but
now.
I don't think they've been announced, so I can't.
They've got Coach Kareev. They've got that guy, Coach Kareev, who works with role swaps. Yeah, he's an expert on role swaps. He knows I'm not feeling the DPS at the moment. I'm going to insert this rookie I've got who's playing support at the moment. Yeah, I'm just going to give him a try in the main team.
I think
go on.
Sorry, I think Moon's like a like from all I can see is like he seems like a good head coach in the fact that he like gathers opinions well. He sets culture. He has like presence on the team like as a leader, but maybe not in terms of strategy. Like he's not it doesn't seem to me that there's like kind of 2 types of coaches. One who's like more based in strategy. One who's like more like I guess delegation as far as head coaches go. It's like and I think ideally you have both. That's what I'm striving for as a head coach is to have both strategy and I'm working on like how to be a better head coach in terms of setting culture, staff direction and stuff like that. But I think Moon has like the other side figured out, but not so much the strategy. So if they don't have like good strategic coaching staff, I think they might struggle at points. But I think their core is still intact, right? Like daemoN was saying, as far as the players. So I think you'll see like less explosive growth and more meta-dependent growth, like what just naturally fits with the team. But I think that they'll be weaker than last season overall, is my guess. And it's easy to say weaker. In fact, that they were like number 2, right? So like it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that they would be weaker than last season. But I don't know if it's as weak as like people are saying, like whether they're bottom tier or anything. But maybe they are middle of the pack. Maybe they're upper middle of the pack. I don't know. But they definitely lost, I think, important parts to a mixed team for sure.
I've got a question for both of you. This is not even meant to be a question you can answer. So my favorite kind, impossible questions, right? So here's the question.
Who is John Galt?
Are you ready? I know that sadly that shouldn't even have been an impossible question, but it was. So whatever. Got to know your audience. This is the question, right? So based on a lot of your answers, I notice you both heavily subscribe to the philosophy of like, it's not about how good the player is. It's about like, what his role is within the team and teamwork and communication and developing yourself, and
which, by the way, can we discuss how the irony of a guy named John Galt existing in a socialized team-based atmosphere of the LA Gladiators?
Maybe he's there to balance them out. That's the thing. He's there to be like, no, it is all about the person. Yeah, Kareev, you're right. You are the man. You just do everything in this team. So anyway, the point I was going to get to is this, right? If indeed this is the world we live in, right, and it's more about like just the players you have, and there's a lot of great players out there, what do you think of the fact that, especially with all the expansion teams, the Overwatch League is basically Korean? Like it's basically majority Korean, and then there's some teams have some NA or European, or some teams have some Chinese players, but it's largely a Korean league. Like it's mainly dealing with Korean players. You're either playing Korean players or you're probably playing with Korean players on your team. So what do you think of this aspect?
I think like me and daemoN are talking about team stuff, and we think it's important because as a head coach to instill that type of environment. Yeah. But I don't think we're doubting ourselves and saying like players aren't better, that talent doesn't exist. Like individual skill is very clear, right? Like that is undeniable. I think we just value more of a team environment and growth because that's like a long-term thing and something that we can very much control versus like talent where we might not get the right people in the market or like different metas at different times. So just kind of noting like I think talent certainly exists. And as far as why there are so many Koreans in the league, I think there's just more talent in Korea. Like, I think it's from a cultural standpoint too. Like, it is promoted from like the bottom up. Like, it's embedded into their society. For example, American football is pretty much strictly in America. We're gonna have the best football players in the world, 100%. I bet you all the like 95% of the players are from America, right? Like, we're just gonna have the best football. Baseball, similarly, like it's us, Japan, like
Latin America has a lot of good players.
Yes, Central and like South America like has good baseball players, but that was cultural, right?
Sure.
So I think like similarly, you're gonna see like a country that is very small but has like a more focused culture on gaming. They're gonna just be better gamers in that culture. It's gonna be more culturally emphasized. Whereas North America, Europe, it's less so, but you can still find talent there. Like even comparing population size, right? Like it's just strange to find players in such a small country in South Korea compared to like all of North America with US, Canada, Mexico, and then Europe like being a whole continent as well with a bunch of different people. Like I think it's just because Koreans have that culture embedded into them, and I don't think it's anything like genetic or anything like that. I kind of like refuse to believe anything genetic with that. And I think the same thing goes for like women in esports as well. Like it's not a fact of like anything genetic or physical or on why they couldn't play. It's just cultural reasons. Like it's like gaming itself is already not exactly like a positive thing for most parents or anything. Like, but women gaming is like even less so, right? That's more strange, I would say, just from the population size. The reason why they game is different too. Like I read a survey for like League of Legends, and it was like 50% of them got into it because of a significant other, which is like a different reason. That's like a social aspect, less so a competitive aspect. So you're like kind of pruning your population there. So it's like no surprise to me that most of the gamers are, or most of the people in OWL are Korean males at all. Like it's not surprising.
Because it does seem like this is something that when the Overwatch League began and the numbers were way lower, you know, you had a couple of teams that were all Korean, then you had a couple that had a few Koreans, and you had a few that was like, obviously you had like Florida Mayhem, Fuel, and, you know, a bunch of teams that weren't all Korean. But if you look, the trend generally has been, do you need a new player? Get a Korean player. Like, except for a few teams, that's basically the default answer everyone's had.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of scouting as well, because dpei was speaking about it. Like scouting is there's not a lot how to say it, like there's no like imposter in like Overwatch League. Like there's many good coach, but obviously there's like less good coach. The fact is like scouting in general is kind of difficult, and I need to give props as well for Fusion in season 1 for trying to make like a melting pot of like a lot of players, training them out and like get the better fit. And that's why in the end they ended up like with a mixed Korean and like international roster, making it to second place. Like Kirby and the rest of the coaching staff are like, we need to get like the competent people. And obviously the Koreans are the one to pick, because if we need to speak about cultural thing, myself, I got a PC like for gaming and stuff at like 17 or 18 because I didn't have the money for it. When in Korea, you just need to get like money from your parents and you can go to a PC bank and do it like for 5 years and play. And obviously why we have like 16, 15 gods in like gaming in Korea, because they can go to those PC games, having other players being as good and trying to do the same thing as them, and like just have access to gaming. And since the competitivity in Korea is so strong as well, you need to strive in like huge hard work ethics to get to the top, and at some point like make it to gaming, which is not really the case in like Western. We're more lazy because we don't have really that much of competitivity, and that's as well we don't really go for this like gaming culture and trying to like strive at a really young age to like work ethics and training really hard over a game. So obviously when you're like a coach, even more if you don't really have like good scouting talent, you would just say, hey, I just need to pick a Korean and let's go. Like this is the same for a super certain team. Like why would you pick an European roster when you can get a full Korean roster? Easy way. So obviously there's like some challenge being like, do you want to get like European or international roster and try to like them, like make them go to the top, or just get the Korean roster and let them do whatever they want, you know? So that's
was
why
it actually intentional for you that you did you actually consider Korean players for your team? Did you only scout Europeans? What was the logic?
I mean, there's obviously like some options that we have, but I think both for the organization, media-wise, but as well for in-game-wise, because I like to develop talents and stuff, and having the coaching stuff for it, like the European like way would have been make the most sense for me. And I think this is a great adventure that we like focusing on for season 2, like going for this roster. I think we're not like anyone else in-game wise, but as well, let's say that the game wise. Trying
to play the game on hard mode. No Koreans, only Europeans.
Well, I do think, I mean, at least minimally, we can say that you could theoretically have a top tier team comprised of all European players within the league, or at least all Western players. They're just spread more thinly across the Overwatch League in general. I mean, we can talk about Philadelphia making it to the finals with running, you know, only a couple of Korean players within their starting roster, right? So there are
one of them was
ways
Carpe,
to do it.
You know,
what?
It helps that one of those players is Carpe.
Yes, exactly. It did help that one of those players.
Yeah, we see, but again, you need to have the league.
Sure.
But there's also ways you could do it differently, you know, with that roster as well, because you could look, for example, at the Gladiators, which last season, you know, they ran Asher to start with, but by the end it was mostly a Silk Thread, Hydration, Surefour rotation on the DPS. And I think that if you are smart with the way that you rotate your DPS and the way that you sort of cultivate your players' strengths and then swap them in and out of maps, it would be, in theory, possible to do that. You're just making it harder on yourself. There's no doubt about that. But the skill has always been there with European players across esports in general. It's the American and the North American players, American and Canadian players that really struggle in the esports realm.
At the risk, Monty, of triggering people watching this show, like anyone who thinks that angle that you always get labeled with of like, oh, he just thinks Koreans are good for some reason, he's just biased. It's like, you do realize, guys, everyone who said when Apex began, you remember the first season of Apex about how, you know, the Western teams will be just as good and, you know, Koreans aren't even that good. All I'm going to tell you is this, like I said this on the other day on Twitter, is it's so ridiculous how good Koreans are at Overwatch that if you had some sort of Back to the Future Gray's Sports Almanac moment where you know all the results, you know who to get beforehand, right? You would literally go and recruit teams who are at the bottom of Apex in some of the seasons. Like you would go and get the bad Kongdu Uncia. That's the team that's like all Shanghai Dragons and fucking dpei's team now. You'd go and get Mighty AOD after they finished last place because almost the entire team is in the over. It's like, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's like, you'd get every Korea contenders team basically.
And even they had
DM, no, what's a DM who was on that team?
Yeah, he was
Animo was on that team.
Mighty AMD.
I think it was Erster, DM. I think MB Fate.
Yeah, and
no, Andy was on another team. It was Fate and Carry, I think, in the same team. But Fate and Carry was like on Arenas or something. I don't recall.
I was going to look it up. So this was their season 3 team, which was, by the way, placed bottom of their group.
Oh, Bonnie was.
They were in the hardest group, to be fair, but yeah, they were in they came last.
They were in a group with Lunatic High and Kongdu Panthera, who were the finalists, and Rogue. So that was obviously a super hard group. It was DM, Erster, Thorncut, Fate, Sleep, Kareev, Life Q, and Moon. Sleep is Animo. Yeah, Sleep is Animo.
So there you go. There's the Gray's Sports Almanac move. You come out of the time portal, Monty, and you say, oh, hi, I'm here from the future where there's an Overwatch league and it's a massive global league with millions invested. I'm here to sign a team. And then everyone goes, all right, who are you signing? Lunatic High? You go, no, why would I do that, you idiot? They're shit. And they go, what? And then they go, oh, who are you signing then? Kongdu Panthera? Well, they actually are going to be very good, but I know they'll be too expensive. I'm signing the Mighty AOD and I'm going to wait 2 years from now to sign Kongdu Uncia. Why are you doing that though? All the good players have been moved to Panthera. Shut up. I know what I'm doing. And then, like, you would actually have the min-max on all of history. You'd have signed them for the minimum amount, but they would be the best player. Oh, and also, while I'm there, out of the time portal, obviously I just pick up Carpe, and everyone's like, why are you picking that guy? Shut up. You don't need to know. It just works out. That's all I'm telling you. Because it doesn't make any sense if you watch Apex.
Well, Moon was coaching that Mighty AOD roster as well. So, yeah, the only players who aren't there anymore, like Thorncut and LiftQ or LifeQ, like, that's actually crazy that you would have Animo, Kareev, Fate, Erster, and DM all on one roster. And then Kongdu Uncia was coached by J-Feel, who's now a coach for London, and Bubbly, who's a coach as well. And it was like Panker, Decay, daemoN. Yeah, got some good players there.
Some pretty legit ones, especially over the years, some of the people they got.
I mean, I like, speaking as a coach, you can't always control the players you get or like what time in their career that you get. But I think making the most of it is really like... we look back and you can be like really like say like hypothetically if I had this team full of superstars we could make it work, but like you really do have to make it work within the season, and like a lot of that is like culture building, how you deal with things as a team. And I think it only like those teams are probably RNG'd a lot. Like you could get 6 talented players together and it's not good because the players don't get along, the coaching staff wasn't like very competent, right? Like I would say pre-OWL coaching staffs weren't that good. I would say even right now during OWL, like coaching staffs might not be that good. But like there's like a lot of different factors, and I do think there's like elements of randomness, right? But like as your job as a coach is to reduce that randomness, get the structure there, build it up rather than it just being like these RNG things. Because I could totally imagine that team Mighty AOD just not doing well, right? Like there was probably some internal conflict there and like irresolvable things, and like Fade and Kariv stuck together, but maybe Erster and DM, like good players, can't really transition well in certain metas, stuff like that. It's not I would say as black and white as like grab the best players from 2 years ago, change the present, and then you end up with a star team.
You know what, dpei, you're correct, mate. It's not as black and white as that. I also don't have time machine technology, so it's as hypothetical, mate. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like, you know what? If I do get a time machine, I won't get all those players.
You're telling me you don't have access to the time machine? I just want to make this really clear here.
Thorin has yet to meet Doc Brown, and this is it's actually provable that Thorin doesn't have a time machine because we already know he would have altered
a lot
certain
of things I would have changed in my own.
There's no way he goes this timeline like
exactly.
He takes all my hypotheticals and just makes them all.
And by the way, don't worry, dpei.
Anybody doesn't have a time machine, it's Thorin.
I know, dpei, you were working this theme in very subtly, but we have got the message loud and clear that some coaches are crap in the Overwatch League. Like that theme has been fully established, Monty. That dpei doesn't think all the coaches are really good. We understand that. Okay?
David, do you think so? I'm just like assuming. I don't know who's good, who's bad.
There's got to be some bad coaches. Come on, there is in every sport. Right?
I love this. I like dpei, head coach, confused about which coaches are good and bad. dpei, we know you think that specifically that some coaches are bad. You must, because you literally compete against them. So
sure.
Yeah, but I would never be confident in saying it. I just like think, it's hard.
Small, I guess it's hard to know like exactly like the competence of a coach when you're not really working with them. Yeah. So like there's a lot of people like saying, oh my god, this coach is amazing, or oh, this coach is shit, but in the end, like they don't really know what they're doing in the team, and that's the issue I think in like judging coach in general. Like you can't really know what they're doing as long as you don't like you're in the team. And the same goes with the players. Like you can see some players doing like crap in games or like not being like consistent and stuff, but in the end they're like walking 10 hours a day, doing great stuff with the team, being like really like present in strategy talk and stuff like that. Like again, it's hard to tell, but I think like a majority of coaches are like really good. Obviously there's like some, again, maybe less good, but I don't think there's like any imposter in the team right now in teams.
So what are your guys' predictions for the season? I know you haven't seen everybody or you haven't played yourselves, but right now, who are going to be the bottom teams? Who hasn't impressed you at all? You got to put yourself on the line here.
And remember, it's not actually. Remember, though, guys, it's not actually considered rude to say if they're bottom, because the thing is, we can't really know outside of a team how good a team is internally and the way the communication structure works. Therefore, now that we've said that disclaimer, you actually aren't giving a harsh opinion. You just for the sake of just to humour us, basically, us plebs who just think
who can't have opinions about anything. What is knowledge?
We're professionally ignorant, so just join our world for a moment.
So based on what we see right now,
like whose lineup doesn't look good.
Yeah. So I joined again dpei. I think on like Boston overall, I don't think like they're doing like great, but again, it depends a lot on like what they do with the team and stuff. Mayhem, I suppose, wouldn't be that impressive. Depends on again the way they work, because this is pretty difficult to have like TV and apply on the team and like choose the rate of Koreans. They had like major changes with the coaching staff as well. So on the paper right now, we can see Mayhem maybe having a bad start. I don't have anyone right now. And again, like since we didn't play like everyone, we can't really tell. But I think the two of them right now are on the line on the bottom team, but they have like strong feeling, at least for Boston, that they can go higher up depending on what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the power rankings kind of like get the bottom tier teams, right? Like, but after that, I actually am very like unsure.
You can't just say that. You can't just deflect other people's opinions.
Yeah, I mean, we can just say like DC, Mayhem, like Outlaws, maybe Boston, like they don't look as good now. Even Boston, like we haven't scrimmed in a while. Like some of these teams we haven't scrimmed in a while. So, but at the time they didn't look good, and it looked like very hard things to fix, like more fundamentally. But I mean, yeah, they might not be bad in the future, but I think for like every other team, it looks extremely close. Like I'm looking at our first 4 games and I'm like, we could win or lose all these. Like all these look like 50-50s to me, or like maybe a little less, maybe a little more. We were like, huh, maybe like Spitfire's our easiest game in our first first game, which is like crazy to say, right? Like there's just a lot of good teams now, and I think this meta is like just like everyone's like close-ish, and it's less variable than say dive, and like less based on individual skill. There is like ton of individual skills too, but it's like harder to tell and harder to pinpoint as coaches, I think, because like you watch Goats v Goats clash, like it's really hard to see what's going on like in a single instance. You have to replay and watch it, right? Like but I think like actually like there's like 15 or like 10 different teams that could be in the first position or like top 5 very easily, at least in stage 1. And it's like I straight up don't know who's going to be good, who's not going to be good. Like the honest opinion, I just straight up don't know. It's not like I'm trying to be nice to some teams. Like I think even Nixel, Spitfire, like the teams that like everyone thinks are really good, like I could see them like not doing well in stage 1, and it's from like really close matches or something like that. Like,
do you know if the Los Angeles Gladiators are going to be better than the Paris Eternal?
I don't know that. Like,
What the hell?
we like scrimmed each other. I saw good things from both teams, and I was like, this is kind of confusing. This looks like it'd be close in a match. I have no idea.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, I don't even know how matches are going to go, right? Like, we talk about scrim stuff. Like, we try to make scrims as accurate to matches as possible. But like, when like matches are like, they go OT and like you have these like different things. Like it's really hard to tell. Like, I'm like, oh wow, we just won team fight than them, and then that determined if we want OT or not. That's pretty much what happened. And like, oh, if they like block the fire strike there, it like
But I think on the paper it's like really easy to tell that we have a lot to prove as a team, and Gladiator should be like the better team because of like whatever they have. There's as well a season 1 team, so they have like an established structure, like the players know each other, etc. Like there's a lot to prove. So I think there's like no problem in even us thinking that we could be like not top tier or anything. But right now, like we're feeling really good. It just depends on the way we evolve and like what we take. But obviously, I think comparison to Gladiators and Paris, obviously Gladiator should be the better team. But again, it's us to prove that maybe it's wrong and we can go forward and like grab a lot of teams.
Yeah, other teams I can say like we're probably slightly below Nixel, Spitfire, but like Paris, literally like a bunch of teams where like I'm like this is like pretty close. I don't know what will happen in the exact thing, but like there's some teams that like have like consistently do like slightly better than us in Koth, like 2-1 us in Koth, and then there are other teams where it's like 1-2, 2-1 type of things, and it is really just like small margins with Goats.
I mean, really is. What you're saying is disturbing to me, because if what you're saying is true, that all these like good teams versus supposedly worse teams are effectively 50-50s, then what that's saying is that the actual skill cap of Overwatch is not high enough.
I wouldn't say that. It's just that it's hard to see what's going to happen in the match. Like, I'm saying the scrims and like the results of scrims look close. And like in a match, if you have like I don't know where other teams are in terms of like set plays and stuff and like rotations and like if they're working on one specific thing or anything. So that's why it's like hard for me to tell. But once we get into matches, it'll be like easier to like see with time who's like actually good and who's actually not. But just going off scrims, it is hard to tell, right? Like.
And I want to add something as well for like the defense of Overwatch League teams right now. It's that we didn't really encounter any real tank meta, like real tank, like back in like season 2 or season 3 of like Overwatch Ranked, and we had like May Reaper or like really tanks oriented comps. Like we didn't really, like the Overwatch League didn't really have
the NIP team that used to just run 3 tanks or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, back at the time, it was like 3 tanks, and at some point it was 3 DPS, Rogue making it like really popular and stuff like that. And we had from this 3 DPS meta being like, I don't know what you call it in English, but being like good. In the end, we like really dive meta-oriented stuff for months. So I think right now the teams, at least in Overwatch League, aren't that good, that at least in tanks, and they need to evolve on that. But overall, I think like the skill cap isn't really like. Obviously, the gap maybe isn't that strong, but I still believe that the Overwatch League team, at least in season 1, has still really established. It's still like the idea of really finding the grounds on like tank and how it works and eventually the alternatives that you can get above it.
Like, I get that, Monty, what they're saying, because first of all, like, it is the preseason, you know, the season hasn't begun, there's no, like, tangible results that we can all judge. Then you add in the GOATS matters, make it very complicated to watch. Add in as well, there's no, you know, there wasn't a replay system in the past, you can't pinpoint everything, you try and look at a VOD, figure out. But with all of that said, this has turned into some sort of mad, like, our guests are fucking Immanuel Kant and David Hume, and we're now discussing, like, what is it possible for a person to actually know? You know, just because I see something, an image in my mind. What does that? It's like, fuck, we've gone too deep here. Let's pull back, boys.
This is the Epistemology of OWL League episode.
Can we just go back to being a sports show where we just say, like, yeah, that team that's got all the good players, they're fucking good, aren't they? Can't wait to see them. The team that made that bad transfer, probably not good. And that was the Doritos halftime minute. Like, you know, what the fuck? What's the last topic then? We'll pick our last topic to close up with. What do you want to talk about? Is there a team we haven't addressed? What about, we'll give dealer's choice here. What do you think, dpei, daemoN? Is there a team we haven't talked about that we should? Is the one that piques
pick a team that interests you. Each one of you pick a team that interests you this coming season.
Titans, they haven't been to the US, right? So I don't think any team has scrimmed them, or at least we haven't, and I doubt any team other than maybe a Korean team scrimmed them before. So I'm pretty curious about how they'll do. It's kind of like, what is the strength of Korean contenders? We saw GC Busan come in last season, and they would have been probably a middle of the pack team. Like looking back, probably a middle of the pack team, maybe like Seoul area, like could have made playoffs, maybe makes playoffs type of thing. Runaway is like kind of a similar symptom, but people like rate them much higher than something like GC Busan, who I thought should have been like really insane. So that's like an interesting storyline to me, and as far as like how good is Korean contenders, and like you took out all the talent from Korea from season 1 and put it into the Overwatch League, and then Runaway was what was left, right? As far as like the notable like strong talent, and then they were like the people left behind essentially, and then like they're coming in now, but with such high expectations. I don't know like where they actually should be straight up. I don't know where they should be. But they also like ran GOATs very well, so it's hard to tell. But I could see them like crashing and burning, kind of like Seoul and Fuel did, relative to their expectations, not in terms of like they actually had a bad season or anything, but more so that way. So that's like an interesting thing for me just to see, like especially having not scrimmed them. I don't know, but I think they have talented players on that team for sure. Bumper, like to me, has like a lot of room to grow on main tank, right? He just switched to that relatively recently. You have to be a good main tank in Overwatch League. You can't just you have to be top tier in Overwatch League to be a good main tank. There's like such differentiating factors. Haxel and Stitch, just like the proven consistent match people. Haxel with like a little more variance, Stitch like always consistent. It'll be interesting to see how that actually transitions to the league itself. And how much better the league is compared to Korean contenders or vice versa.
Sure.
So daemoN's headset died.
You know, maybe I can try to speak. I don't know if there's any echo. You can tell me.
That's good.
I will make it fast. I like to watch excellent Overwatch. So like I have many teams. Fusion is one because they have like increased talent and stuff like that. The coaching stuff is good. Same for Valiant. But if I need to pick one team, I would pick like New York because again, they're really clean. Everything they do, whatever the meta is, like they're always doing really great Overwatch. And because like the skill is so high, both in strategy and like skill wise, like basic stuff, I think this is always a great match to watch because you learn a lot, you understand a lot, and like they're just like really good at Overwatch overall. So I would pick them.
Yeah, I think something interesting about that team, people think it was like carried by Wizards Young or something, but I think it must be, I don't know who does what on, but like it looks like they haven't skipped a beat. And like whether it's Pavane or whoever, like I'll just give credit to the head coach because that's the only other coach I know. Like they must be doing something. There's something in the water over there that they're doing right, because they really haven't skipped a beat from missing Wizards Young, who was like noted to be part of their or like a pretty big part of their success, right? Like they haven't skipped a beat, and I think Pavane is like got to be a really good head coach for kind of leveling those expectations, like having a good team environment, and then also being able to just do that consistently. I think New York is just a great team to watch all the time, as at least as a coach and probably as viewers and stuff. It's just good Overwatch, good team.
I mean, as previously noted, the primary source for Wizard Young being the guy behind everything was Wizard Young. Like, you know, to be fair, like I can't lie. When I think of that myself, you know, maybe you guys are right. Maybe we have to think about how we've constructed our epistemology. Like that seems like it could be a flawed system.
I mean, you guys are in it for entertainment, less so than historical accuracy.
Yes.
Our job isn't to be Stephen A. Smith.
Hey, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. We are acknowledging that this is a thing that happened.
Sure.
And maybe Wizard Young's a god and DC's just like #1. Who knows, you know, like
we'll see.